Everyone in this room, myself included, supports equal rights and opposes discrimination based on race, color, ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, creed, religion, or sex. To be absolutely clear, we all agree, beep beep, on those provisions. But Proposition 1 adds additional provisions such as sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy outcomes, and reproductive health care and autonomy. You may not know this, but it also adds provisions restraining the free exercise of religion, a United States constitutional right. It erodes parental rights, and it grants the government the authority to discriminate in support of favored groups. To be absolutely clear once again, I oppose discrimination against anyone, including males who identify as females, females who identify as males, or those who are attracted to the same sex, a different sex, both or neither. We are all children of God, and we should all be respected. I'd like to start by talking about gender identity and gender expression regarding women. At the same time, however, I and the vast majority of our residents in New York recognize that there are inherent differences between men and women that can and should be recognized. Shouldn't we protect women's rights and support equal opportunities for women? All women organizations, such as Girl Scouts, girls-only private schools, women's-only colleges and universities, the YWCA, and the AAUW, provide opportunities for women to excel as women. Women's scholarships provide additional funding for women to meet those important educational goals. In fact, the AAUW, which has been advocating for women and girls since 1881, has awarded over $135 million in fellowships and grants to more than 13,000 scholars. Women-only places are provided to women for their safety and security, like restrooms and locker rooms. We even have separate women-only prisons. Why? To protect women from sexual assault. Women's sports ensure that women can safely and fairly compete on a level playing field. If Proposition 1 passes, biological males who identify as women will be constitutionally protected to participate as women in women's sports, use women's places, go to women's schools, and apply for women's-only scholarships. On gender identity and gender expression regarding parental rights, New York's educational policy currently holds that schools are not permitted to disclose a student's gender identity, name, or pronouns to their parents without the student's consent. I and the vast majority of people oppose policies that keep parents in the dark about their own children. Proposition 1 enshrines gender ideology as a right, and the government could use that power to teach minor children about gender ideology without parental consent, or it could use the power of the state to provide children with life-altering chemical and surgical procedures without parental consent. On the free exercise of religion. Unlike the New York State Human Rights Law, the insurance law, and other New York laws combating discrimination, Proposition 1 has no exceptions. The last clause in the language prevents a protected class, like religion and those people freely exercising their religious beliefs, from interfering, limiting, or denying the rights of any other protected class. Thus, for example, this amendment could force religious institutions to hire and retain people who act and speak contrary to the religious beliefs of that institution. A more specific example, it could prevent the Catholic Church from removing a priest that was having sexual relations and impregnate a woman, which is an opposite of his vow of celibacy. The state could interfere in the church's decision. The state could punish Christian health ministries for failing to provide gender-affirming care or abortion procedures by withholding public funding. The failure to recognize the free exercise of religion violates the U.S. Constitution, which I took an oath to uphold. If Proposition 1 passes, it will relegate religious freedom as a second-class right. And this is already happening. In Massachusetts and Oregon, they've denied religious couples the ability to foster or adopt children because moral beliefs may conflict with gender ideology. In California, Catholic hospitals are facing lawsuits for not performing life-altering, gender-affirming surgery. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of Proposition 1 is its provision authorizing discrimination against any protected class. The language permits the state to adopt any law, regulation, program, or practice against any protected class to, quote, prevent or dismantle discrimination. We were all taught this at a young age. Two wrongs do not make something right. The obvious and unnerving questions that are left unanswered by this language, which immediately come to mind, are: who decides which group has the government's favor? Who decides what laws, regulations, programs, or practices need to be adopted to prevent or dismantle discrimination? Who decides what discrimination needs preventing or dismantling, and for how long? The answer is the government. Proposition 1 will enshrine the government's right to discriminate against its own citizens for reasons the government thinks are okay. Proposition 1 is completely unnecessary and extremely problematic. The state legislature already has broad authority to prohibit discrimination. I think we would all agree that trans people should not be denied the right to open up a bank account, buy a home, or get a job because they are trans. A trans victim of a crime should be treated the same as any other victim, with dignity and compassion. At the same time, gender identity and gender expression are relatively new concepts in our country's history. And because of nuances in human behavior and the established immutable nature of the human person, our legislators are in the best position to gather data, speak with their constituents, and pass laws that protect all people. And New York has done that by passing the New York Human Rights Law, which outlaws discrimination against all of the classes listed in the amendment while preserving constitutional exceptions that are not included in Proposition 1. Proposition 1, if it passes, will override all laws and regulations that currently exist in New York. It will also prevent these nuanced issues and questions from being answered. It will put these issues in the hands of the courts. Proposition 1 is not about abortion. State law already allows late-term abortions right up to the day before a child is born, even if the unborn child is fully developed and can easily survive outside the womb. Proposition 1 reverses decades of progress in protecting women, sports, women organizations, women's scholarship programs, and other protections for women. Proposition 1 will unconscionably eviscerate parental rights. Proposition 1 discriminates against religious organizations, and it enshrines a state right to discriminate in support of favored groups, as decided by the government itself. As an attorney, I don't just read the language of the proposition. I read the entire thing. As I mentioned at the beginning, I oppose discrimination. However, I cannot support Proposition 1 for the reasons stated. And I encourage everyone to vote no on November 5th. And that is my grandmother's cue that I am done.